I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Please call the roll.
Councilmember Francisco.
Here.
Hotchkiss. House.
Here.
Murillo.
Here.
Rouse. White. Mayor Schneider. Proclamation declaring November 13, 2012 as Purple Heart Day.
Thank you for being here. The City of Santa Barbara honors the men and women who have received the Purple Heart Medal. And the Purple Heart Medal is awarded to living members of the armed forces of the United States who were wounded in war at the hands of the enemy. This award is given posthumously to those who are killed in action or died of wounds. And initially created as the badge of military merit by General George Washington in 1782, the Purple Heart is the oldest decoration. And the City of Santa Barbara recognizes and honors its militants community, as well as Purple Heart recipients. The City of Santa Barbara has joined together with the Military Order of the Purple Heart in celebrating the civic event. So therefore, I, Helene Schneider, by virtue of the authority vested in me as mayor of the City of Santa Barbara, California, do hereby proclaim the 13th day of November 2012 as Purple Heart Day in the City of Santa Barbara and recognize the value of our committed men and women who serve our nation. Thank you very much for being here today. Thank you. If you'd like to say a few words, you're welcome to.
Please.
If you could state your name for the record.
My name is Michael Cook. I am head, or known as the commander, of the local chapter of Military Order of the Purple Heart. Thank you, Mayor Schneider and council members. Ladies and gentlemen, we are all in this together. We are all part of the interlocking matrix of American society. Imagine a spear with a long shaft and pointed tip. All tax-paying citizens have their hand on the spear. Our combat forces and Purple Heart recipients are the tip of the spear. Society, through our elected representatives, asks its combat soldiers to jump off the spinning carousel of civilized social order. Then jump into the netherworld of seeking out, closing with, and destroying the enemy of our homeland. When the mission is done, some combat soldiers find it difficult to climb back onto the carousel. This is where the Military Order of the Purple Heart steps forward to help veterans and their families. The Military Order of the Purple Heart coordinated with the council today to organize today's proclamation. The Military Order of the Purple Heart is made up exclusively of Purple Heart recipients who were wounded while engaging hostile forces to our country. The Military Order of the Purple Heart is a veterans service organization. It is an IRS-recognized charity that is all about veterans helping veterans and their families. I ask that anyone who is a Purple Heart recipient or related to a Purple Heart recipient to consider joining the Military Order of the Purple Heart. Ladies and gentlemen, your proclamation today honors all veterans. For this, you have our gratitude. Thank you sincerely for today, and your actions today will resonate for decades to come. Thank you.
Thank you. I'd also like to acknowledge all the veterans who did organize so many events over the weekend for Veterans Day. They were quite moving. We have any changes to the agenda?
There are none, Madam Mayor.
Okay. We'll move on to public comment, and we'll start. We have 2 minutes here at the podium. We'll start with Scott Wenz. We'll be followed by Kenneth Locke.
Madam Mayor, members of the Council, Scott Wenz representing Kaiser Basic. We've been before you before on this issue, but with the storm on the East Coast, the perfect storm of Sandy, we once again come to you and urge you not to narrow any of the streets on the lower part of town particularly State Street. This is an important issue. We've had a 7-point earthquake in Vancouver. We've had a 3.5 up around Paso Robles. We've had another 3.5 down south of here. We're being bracketed. When I was a kid, this area, as some of you will know, used to have earthquakes all the time. You get a perfect earthquake or a perfect storm, and you get high tide with water coming down the creeks, you're going to get flooding down there, you're going to get devastation. If you allow the narrowing of State Street, you're going to ultimately regret it. This is too important to allow it to continue to go ahead. Now, I've looked at some of the issues having to do with how the council operates and so forth. You are the ultimate authority. You can order an immediate halt by the Public Works Department, allowing the narrowing of State Street from Haley down south, and you can then have it reviewed again. You have new information. You now have the line showing where a tsunami would hit. Imagine a tsunami, earthquake, and a rainstorm all at the same time. You're going to need to get people in and out of there. Thank you very much.
Kenneth Locke will be followed by Robert Burke.
My name is Kenneth Locke. I did a video this morning I'm going to upload this afternoon. I've done this before. I'm actually kind of going about it again now. And I call it what is a mind-body exercise. And when it comes to tennis, I can actually explain what a mind-body exercise is. And it's where I use a graph, the idea of a graph, and then the plus, plus, minus, minus. And when you have a relationship with a mind-body exercise, you'll be increasing mentally and then also physically. You'll be in that quadrant. Right now, we have not, in this social matrix that we have here, we have not recognized yet a teacher who could provide the means for getting into that plus area. And now you do through my teachings. And I'm here to say that this is kind of like it's a game changer. It's going to make actually the game that we're playing right now, it's going to make it obsolete. And it's going to reform our educational system. And it's important, the teachers are going to have to go to reform school and be reformed in relation to that integration, because education, I'm here to say, is going to be reformed upon the foundation of the integration of the mind and in the body. And as I mentioned to you last week, talked about the nature of what reality is. And we can actually understand that integration in relation to reality, and we can actually understand the gap, which historically we've been suffering from, and in relation to being delusional. Just wanted to take the time to pass this along to you, and thank you.
Robert Burke, and then Carl Wagner.
"18 veterans suicide a day." Madam Mayor, council members, my purpose today is not to advocate, but to educate. That figure comes from the Circuit Court in San Francisco in an opinion delivered recently within the last year or so about Veterans Affairs. I have been diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder. Some of the symptoms are startle response, hypervigilance, paranoia, panic attacks, suicidal ideation, rescue fantasies, spontaneous weeping. You'll notice that I'm always sitting, just about almost always sitting on the aisle. Fast escape. And that's just about true in any building I go into, whether it's Sunday services or an auditorium. My purpose today is to talk to not only you, but the people on the other side of the camera. I wear this billboard on my head to make people aware that post-traumatic stress disorder exists and that it's not something to be ashamed of. It is manly to ask for help. It is womanly to ask for help. And one of the characteristics is that we isolate. It is time to come out. From separation to community, from isolation to participation, from exclusion to inclusion. My purpose in standing here is to take away whatever shame or isolating experience you may have and to seek help. The Veterans Administration is doing what it can. It wants more resources. We have a national epidemic on our hands. My appeal today is to appeal to those to come forth and find the help that is available. Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Carl Wagner, and then Mr. Pennington, you're giving your 2 minutes to Mr. Wagner. So, Mr. Wagner, you have 4 minutes, and he'll be the final speaker.
Mayor, council members, I apologize for not speaking the last 2 weeks due to prior engagements. I come today with a twisted heart, at will, at best. I'm conflicted because I'm part of a program that I believe in. It's the safe parking program. But at the same time, I'm dealing with crimes being committed against me and orders to appear in court, and we'll talk about those in a minute. So with that in mind, I am here to speak out against the closing of Cabrillo Street as well as the closing of Dwight Murphy parking lot and the numerous streets to RVs in the city. And of course, the tactics that the city of Santa Barbara's employees and the county of Santa Barbara and its respective employees and its agents, associates, representatives have used to achieve its illegal goals. Madam Mayor, when I last spoke, you accused me of speaking global. Today I wish to speak of this city and this county and the criminal acts committed against me by its employees, agents, and representatives. I turn your attention to this ticket dated December 24th, 2011. I received a ticket for illegally using my motor home at Dwight Murphy parking lot at approximately 1 o'clock in the afternoon. This person who originally contacted the police was paid $1,000 to make false accusations against me. When all of this really began to smell fishy and I asked questions of everyone, officers, detectives, those in the neighborhood, this bogus ticket was later coerced and massaged and concocted into an investigation and an attempt to charge me with a hate crime. Getting a little deeper. All later to be found untrue. When the officers I subpoenaed into court failed to show and the district attorney attempted to provide bogus reasons why those officers failed to show, it became obvious to the judge and she dismissed the case. One has to ask the question, who is behind this and what do they have to gain? Oh, the tangled web we weave when we practice to deceive. If that isn't gross enough, at approximately the same time I was going to court regarding this bogus ticket, a man attacks me in a coffee shop, spits in my face, a fight ensues, and he later files a bogus charge of reasons of injuries of which I'm being investigated. I can't help but know that this is all connected. I have to ask others to investigate this supposed unrelated crimes, but I stand before this council declare to all here to do not be surprised to learn that the people behind these crimes actually work for this city and this county. To that, I turn your attention to Attorney General Opinion 89-602, cited in multiple jurisdictions across the state. The Attorney General, John Vandekamp, was asked to give guidance with regards to the rise in those living in their motorhomes due to financial crisis, and the numerous charges, tickets, and trips to courtrooms those living in RVs were incurring. He then, and based on multiple times this ruling has been used in court, it still stands today, and I will read the conclusion. A California city has no authority to prohibit the parking of particular categories of vehicles on its residential streets during all or certain hours of the day, with the exception of commercial vehicles having a manufacturer's gross vehicle weight rating of 10,000 pounds or more. This is an in-depth study that has been done multiple times regarding the RV situation in cities across America. And I welcome you to look at it. I'll provide you with a copy of it because I think it's important that you know that these are illegal signs up, and that there are people like myself that are getting criminal acts committed against them in an effort to run me out of this city. And I'm very ashamed to be here. Thank you for your time.
Okay, that concludes public comment. Move on to the consent calendar. There's some items to read.
Item 4, introduction of zoning ordinance amendment, Municipal Code Section 2887300, pertaining to non-residential construction projects. Recommending that Council A introduce and subsequently adopt by reading of title only an ordinance of the Council of the City of Santa Barbara amending Section 2887300 of Chapter 2887 of Title 28 of the Municipal Code regarding limitations on non-residential development within the city, and B, adopt by reading of title only a resolution of the Council of the City of Santa Barbara establishing procedures for administration of the amendments to Titles 28 and 29 of the Municipal Code, implementing the General Plan Update Growth Decisions, and rescinding Resolution Number 09058. And item 5, adoption of resolution of intent to vacate easement for public right-of-way on a portion of Lowena Drive, including recommendation A, that council adopt by reading of title only a resolution of the Council of the City of Santa Barbara declaring the intention of the council of said city to vacate a certain portion of Lowena Drive located adjacent to assessor's parcel numbers 029202001 and 029201004 as hereinafter described, and providing for the holding of a public hearing, the posting of required notices, and the publication of this resolution.
Thank you. Without further objection, we'll waive further reading. Anyone need to take an item off the consent calendar, or is there a motion to approve it?
There is, Madam Mayor.
Moved and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, report from the Finance Committee. Mr. Francisco.
Madam Mayor, the Finance Committee heard today a report on the first quarter financial results for the city, and it's steady as she goes.
That's a good statement. Moving on to item number 11.
Proposed landmark designation of St. Anthony's Seminary Complex and Grounds, recommending that council adopt by reading of title only a resolution of the Council of the City of Santa Barbara designating St. Anthony's Seminary Complex and Grounds at 2300 Garden Street as a city landmark.
Thank you. Who's Mr. Lamone or Ms. Hernandez? Hello. Get you settled there. We'll get to public comment. I'll call for public comment. We have a slip from you? Yeah, we'll do a staff report first, and then I'll call your name up. Thank you, Mr. You're Mr. Higgins? Mr. Higgins, yes? Great.
Ready? Good afternoon, Madam Mayor and council members. This is the city landmark designation staff report for St. Anthony's Seminary Complex and Grounds at 2300 Garden Street. This is a 1928 aerial view of the complex as it sits behind the mission overlooking this grassy lawn. The St. Anthony's complex is significant for its unusual mix of architectural styles, which were associated with Santa Barbara, including Romanesque, Spanish Renaissance, and Spanish colonial revival styles. And I'll give you some close-ups. There were 7 buildings that were built on this site over the years. The St. Anthony's served as a Franciscan boys' school throughout most of the 20th century and expanded from one building constructed in 1901 to become a complex of 7 by 1949. The 12-acre campus sitting behind the Mission Historical Park in El Pueblo Viejo Landmark District Part 2, it was once part of the Mission Santa Barbara lands. Based on surface observations, historic maps, photographs, and results of archaeological excavation, there is also evidence that there are locations on St. Anthony's campus considered to be high in archaeological data potential from the early mission days. The landscaping has remained consistent since 1901 when the seminary opened and includes this large open lawn to this day, and below the main building, a series of palms, Norfolk pines planted in front of the main building, a redwood tree at the rear of the campus, and rough lace ashlar retaining walls in front of the main building, and sandstone walls surrounding the entire property, as well as original sandstone gates. Included in the designation is the entire parcel that St. Anthony's sits on. This is the entrance gates coming off of Garden, and here you see the sandstone walls. This is a site plan of the entire site. This is the main building right here, which was built in 1901. And the additions started coming off of the building in wings. The west wings was built, and service wing were built in 1923. The chapel built in 1926. The Muir building built in 1939. The shop building 1938, and the refectory 1948. And they all their styles complemented each other and made a beautiful, cohesive campus. This was the main building right after it was finished in 1901 in a Romanesque style. It was designed by a Franciscan brother named Adrian Ruhr. This was the building right after the earthquake in 1925. The top two stories of the building were damaged and reconstructed and designed by architect Ross Montgomery, and he actually changed the style a bit, and he put a Spanish colonial revival style top to the Romanesque bottom elevation. Here you can see the building right after it started getting some additions. These two wings were also designed by Ross Montgomery in the Spanish colonial revival style. This is the west wing, and Ross Montgomery actually copied this front entrance from a 16th century doorway that he found in Sevilla, Spain. This was the service wing, designed in 1923, also in the Spanish colonial revival, with the red tile roof, stucco walls, deeply recessed multi-pane windows. And in 1926, the same designer, Ross Montgomery, designed the chapel, although this he did out of poured concrete in a Romanesque style, and did this tower in an Italian Renaissance style. The shop building was constructed in 1938, again in the Spanish colonial revival, making the whole campus a cohesive whole with the red tiles roofs and the stucco walls. The John Muir building was designed in 1939 by John Donovan. And finally, the refectory was the final building designed in 1949 by Richard Putman. Again, it continues to be compatible with the complex with its red tile roof, stucco walls, and it distinguished itself with this classical pediment over the doorway. The complex and grounds do qualify for city landmark status as per the Santa Barbara Municipal Code 2222040. Criterion A, the complex is noted for its association with the Franciscan presence in Santa Barbara, which began with the establishment of the Colegio Franciscano in 1868 at the Mission. The present complex was the home of St. Anthony Seminary from 1899 to 1987 and continues in the same educational use today for the San Roque schools. The complex is identified with the Franciscan Order, who not only significantly contributed to the culture and development of Santa Barbara, but worked to build a staff and a school to educate priests. The complex also is significant for its unusual mix of architectural styles, which are associated with Santa Barbara, including the Romanesque, Spanish Renaissance, and Spanish colonial revival styles, as we saw as we looked at each piece. Criterion E, this complex is the best remaining type in its neighborhood, as it is actually one of the only complexes of its type in the city. And criterion F, the primary significant architectural elements of the complex are the works of architects brother Adrian Ruhr and Ross Montgomery, and their noted design efforts significantly influenced the heritage of the city. Montgomery is noted for his ecclesiastical architecture at the state level, and Ruhr is considered a notable architect at the state and national levels for his body of work for the Franciscans throughout California and the Midwest. Criterion H, the complex is adjacent to the National Historic Landmark and City Landmarks of Santa Barbara Mission to the east and the City Landmark Hoffman House to the west. The history of the three properties is intertwined, and the preservation of the complex is essential to preserving the character of El Pueblo Viejo Landmark District Part 2. The complex also sits on a commanding site overlooking Garden Street, and its 7-story bell tower and 4-story central building are singular physical characteristics which make it a familiar visual feature of the neighborhood. In Criterion J, St. Anthony's does have potential archaeological deposits on the campus from the early mission days. This would include a threshing floor, a weaving shop, a granary constructed in 1794, kilns, a small reservoir, and a corral, and portions of wall enclosing a patio, and portions of an aqueduct system. The complex still has integrity of location, design, setting, materials, workmanship, feeling, and association. And the current owners, the San Roque School Charitable Trust, is under rehabilitation and has already invested millions in restoring the campus so that it can continue to be a safe educational facility serving children K through 12. It has worked very closely with the Historic Landmark Commission, as well as historian Alex Cole of Preservation Planning Associates, to prepare historic structures reports for each phase and ensure that the work accomplished met the Secretary of Interior standards for rehabilitation. And so far, a lot of the work has been seismic retrofits and making the property accessible. And I just wanted to take a moment to thank them for continuing to invest in this site for the city. And staff does recommend that the City Council adopt a resolution to designate St. Anthony Seminary Complex and Grounds as the city landmark.
Thank you. Any questions from council? Mr. Hotchkiss?
Yes, Madam Mayor. I think that's maybe for Mr. Limon. What restrictions will this designation place on the seminary and the grounds?
Madam Mayor, Councilman Hotchkiss, as with any designation, it elevates the review process by having the Historic Landmarks Commission required findings be made when alterations are proposed. That's primarily the focus. But we use designations also as a form of recognition that this is one of our important community buildings, and I think that, if the building was not designated, it would still have that review process with the Historic Landmarks Commission.
Yeah, I certainly agree with that estimate. So archaeological discoveries could continue, no problem?
Yes, Councilman Hotchkiss, we do have sensitivity for the site, so we have conditioned the project to require monitoring for any type of ground excavation for the project.
And just to repeat, we have full agreement with the owners, correct?
You'll hear, I think, from the owner's agent that they concur that they allowed us to move forward at this time.
Great, thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, we'll move now to public comment. Ray Higgins, like to come on up, followed by Mary Rose, and then Fermina Murray. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Madam Mayor and members of the council. I stand before you to go on record in support of designating St. Anthony's Seminary as a historical monument. I feel that these buildings and grounds should be preserved as an everlasting memorial to the numerous children who were so cruelly molested there, and will serve as a reminder to parents and everyone that they must be constantly vigilant of the protecting their children, because even good organizations can go amok. I would like to read a short email from my son, who was raped and sodomized numerous times there when he was only 14. It's addressed the Santa Barbara City Council from Michael Higgins regarding St. Anthony Seminary Historical Landmark. I am writing to express my support of the consideration that is being given to make St. Anthony Seminary a historical landmark. As a survivor of the sexual abuse that took place at St. Anthony Seminary, I witnessed and experienced a tremendous amount of trauma. I have worked very hard to recover. However, many of my friends and classmates were not as fortunate as I, and have suffered from and died as a result of drug addiction, alcoholism, and suicide. I would like the tower to stand in memory of those whose lives were ruined as a direct result of the atrocities that were committed inside the very walls of the building that is being considered a historic landmark. I would like the memory to last so that we may protect our children in the future and prevent the blindness that would allow wholesale abuse to become acceptable in an organization run so rampant. Respectfully, Michael Higgins. Would you like a copy of this letter? I have copies.
That to the clerk if you'd
Okay.
like, sure. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Higgins. Mary Rose will be followed by Fermina Murray.
Thank you, Mayor Schneider and members of the council. I am Mary Rose, and I'm here today representing the San Roque School Charitable Trust, the owners of the former St. Anthony's Seminary. Today, the trust operates the K-12 Garden Street Academy on this site. Since first acquiring the property in mid-2005, the trustee has worked diligently with the city staff and the HLC members on renovations of the building and grounds. Even though it has not been landmarked, it is within the Landmarks District, and we've actually had the findings from the Historic Landmarks Commission for all of the changes that we have done. We are grateful for the good working relationship we've had with the city staff and the HLC in trying to work through the many, many issues that have come up. And we want to also thank our neighbors, some of whom are here, for their patience during the long construction process, which is still ongoing. When it was purchased 7 years ago, this was one of the largest, if not the largest, complex of unreinforced masonry buildings in the state. There really was no foundation under that main building. It was built on the stones that were quarried from the site. It was quite simply very unsafe. The building's interconnectedness, which is one of its defining historic features, is also one of the things that makes it very expensive to do the renovations, trying to get the in and exits and other things. When purchased, the Charitable Trust estimated that all of the renovations would be complete by the end of 2012, and the cost, in addition to a substantial purchase price, would be about $40 million. That was to stabilize the buildings and to make them usable as a modern school. As with many building projects, and particularly ones involving old buildings, once you open up the walls, you learn a lot more. The structural discovery was astronomical, surpassing estimates by 70%. As of today, the Charitable Trust has invested over $40 million on the renovation and stabilizing these buildings. And their current estimate is that it will take another $40 million to complete. The Charitable Trust is committed to completing the renovations, but it is going to take a bit of time. Much of the work that has been done is not visible to the public, and people wonder what they've actually been doing. Is this when I could show the photos? Is that... That one? Okay. Well, you can't really see it, but essentially they have built a structural building inside the main building, poured a concrete foundation, and stabilized it. So far, there's about $10 million just in stabilizing the main building. And so this is just, again, looking at some of the stabilization methods. This was the refectory. Again, when this was originally built, it was a 3-story building, and in the 40s, it was found to be unstructurally sound, and they took off the top floor. That was supposed to help ease the problems with it. It did not exactly do that. Much of the work, again, is very hard to see, but it is interior work that the public doesn't see. The thing that got the most interest from the community, let's see, was when we actually were working on the bell tower, because this is the thing that everyone in town sees. And the openings, we had to actually enclose for 2 reasons. One, there was an owl nesting there. So outside of the owl nesting season, we had to do this work. And then basically create a structure there. This was one of the things that was very unsafe in that in a heavy earthquake, this tower would start to, the engineers told us this tower was going to sway, and that whole top canopy was going to come off and land somewhere. And they weren't sure where, but it would come off and land somewhere. So this was about another, there's a few $1 million here, a few $1 million there. It all kind of adds up. We do have, today they have modern classrooms in, whoops, that's upside down. These are modern classrooms for the students. It is an operating school, And they are working construction around the operations of the school. Again, a nice modern kitchen facilities. To maintain the they've worked very hard. The owners have worked very hard to maintain the historic integrity while stabilizing the building and installing modern systems and heating, electricity, all those kinds of things. Also unique, there were no girls' bathrooms. There were very few bathrooms at all. One building had no plumbing because it was classrooms and the showers and restrooms were in the dormitory buildings. So this was very much of a complex puzzle piece that has taken quite a bit of time to fix out and work on. Today, the Garden Street Academy is a small school where students work individually and in small groups with specialists in science, art, music, foreign language, technology, drama, and various other areas. Early on in the school's history, they discovered that the hands-on nature of the programs required a lot of room. They have and will have a lot of room when this is finally finished. Now that some of the construction has been completed, this is a space where children can experience success, work within and with the community to have an authentic educational experience, and upon graduation to participate as productive, kind, caring members of society. The Charitable Trust looks forward to maintaining a good working relationship with the city, the HLC, and our neighbors, and we are continuing through this process. We've recently been able to remove some of the temporary electrical power pole that was over across Garden Street, and we're hoping to be able to, in the next year, remove some of the other temporary facilities and keep as we work through this process.
Thank you. I gave you way more than 2 minutes, but I figured $40 million and being the owner and supportive was worth it. So thank you and please let everyone know how much we appreciate all the work that the foundation has done. Fermina Murray, followed by Philip Suding.
Madam Mayor and members of the council, I'm representing the HLC, and we just wanted to once again extend our deepest gratitude to the owners of this property and for all the just an immense work they have done to preserve this most important building in the city. And also to Alex Cole, who did a great report, and to our historian who has pushed us and pursued this designation that took at least a decade to come through. So we have just so grateful to the owners of this property. Thank you.
Philip Suding, and then Fred Sweeney, and the final speaker will be Frederick.
Mayor, council members, my name is Philip Suding, Chair of the Historic Landmarks Commission. I am here on behalf of the Landmarks Commission. I do hope you support this resolution to designate St. Anthony Seminary. It is an important, large building and site. I'm extremely pleased that the landscape and the site are being considered in the designation. It's nice to have clear understanding of what is potentially being considered as a designated landmark. I want to also thank the HLC subcommittee members and the owner for the many hours that were involved in this consideration, and I look forward to the continued good relationship between the HLC, the city, and the owner. Thank you.
Fred Sweeney.
Mayor, Council, Fred Sweeney. I'm representing the Upper East Association. Just here today to encourage you to adopt this resolution. The neighborhood is keenly aware of what's been going on, been watching very carefully, and yes, lots of patience for neighbors, particularly those across the street. So we would encourage you to take this step to make sure that we look at both the landscape and the architecture as a piece of our cultural asset. Thank you.
Frederick Lang.
Hello, my name is Frederick Lang. I'm an alumnus of St. Anthony's Seminary. I also work very heavily with the Alumni Association of the school. I'm here to lend my support to the idea of turning this into a historical monument because the building means a lot to the alumni from the school. Despite part of its dark history, we're in the process of setting up an online archive to display the historic nature of the buildings and the history of the school. And we're hoping to work with the new owners so that we can push that out into the future. But thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, that concludes public comment. It's to the council. Mr. Rouse.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I had a question maybe for Mr. Limon about the designation of the grounds, landscaping, et cetera. What does that entail? I mean, that's obviously we're not going to be pulling a permit for cut the lawn, I would hope, but.
I'll let Ms. Hernandez answer that, Councilman Rouse.
We noted the significant features that are on the site now, which are the sandstone walls and some of the larger trees and large grassy lawn that have been consistent since 1901 when it was built. And when it comes to reviewing it for future use, we would just like to work with the owner to make sure some of these major features remain and that the future items are compatible. It would not prohibit them from putting in new plants and changing the site as it might need, but it would be an overview to make sure that the significant features and significant idea can remain.
Mr. Hotchkiss?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I can't imagine, to use a basketball term, a more obvious slam dunk than this. So I would move now that we take staff recommendation, if you don't mind me making a motion.
Go right ahead.
This early.
I'll second that.
Supporting the city landmark designation for St. Anthony's Seminary and Complex.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Any other comments? Well, I want to thank everyone involved. It's certainly a gorgeous facility and will continue to be due to the work that's being done to make sure it doesn't topple down in an earthquake. So thank you very much. Ms. Murillo?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'd like to thank our Historic Landmarks Commission and our staff and the owners for everything they've done to bring this designation proposal before us. And I'd like to thank Mr. Higgins for being here. And certainly the survivors of St. Anthony's Seminary have my support and wish for healing and reconciliation. And I hope that the San Roque School is creating a new experience and history for children there. Thank you.
Thank you. It's been moved and seconded. All in favor?
Aye. Aye.
Great. Thank you very much. Okay, moved on to item number 12.
Status of resource recovery project at the Tahiguas landfill.
Okay, Mr. Four, Mr. Samario?
Good afternoon, Madam Mayor, council members. Matt Four, Environmental Services Manager. We're here this afternoon to bring to you another update on the Resource Recovery Park proposed at Tahiguas Landfill. As you are aware, this is a project, a multi-year project that staff from the City of Santa Barbara, the County of Santa Barbara, Goleta, Buellton, and Solvang cities have been working on for the past several years. And just to remind you before we get too far into this, that this is the project that that would include a material recovery facility to sort the trash that's currently in the trash can and pull the recyclables out, as well as an anaerobic digester that would take the organic material out of the trash can, convert it to biogas that would be used to turn generators and sell electricity back to the grid, and then to make various grades of soil amendment. So the reason for us today is to give you a little bit of background, especially of what we've accomplished since we were last in front of you in June of this year, to talk about a new element into the process, which is the inclusion of Marburg Industries, the city's franchise waste hauler, into the procurement process. Talk a little bit about the term sheet that the participating jurisdictions have developed, and we've talked to you in concept previously. And then with that as context, to get into the environmental review process under the Environmental Quality Act that we would be undertaking soon. So by way of background, when we were last with you in June, we set forth 3 tasks that the participating agencies would be working on and working to complete in the near future. The first was to complete our financial due diligence of Mustang's proposal and to complete our understanding of the financial models that were the basis of that proposal. The second was to identify and finalize the key areas of negotiation that would be included in an eventual term sheet that we would bring to council for consideration. And thirdly, it was to we were to finalize the project description and then also the alternatives, or some of the alternatives, and the level of analysis that would be undertaken of those alternatives once the environmental review process began. So with those as our tasks, we have completed those 3. And so since we were here in June, staff from the participating jurisdictions did complete our financial due diligence of Mustang's proposal. And we feel that we have a much stronger understanding of the model and the variables that could affect the pricing. We also decided to defer negotiation of many of the financial terms until after CEQA is complete. And as we had brought to you in the past, the earlier drafts of the term sheet spoke about locking in some of the variables, such as the interest rate on the bond debt, the debt-to-equity ratio, and the value of the recyclable commodities that would be pulled out of the trash stream. But since CEQA takes, we're anticipating a minimum of 21 months. The participating jurisdictions opted to defer negotiation on those variables until after the CEQA process is completed. And then after, if the term sheet is signed and we enter into formal negotiations, we would tackle those variables at that point. And the third thing that we as the participating jurisdictions have accomplished is we've now clarified both the base project, the project that will be evaluated under CEQA, as well as some of the alternatives that will be studied in full measure. And because of that, we are ready to initiate the environmental impact report and the formal environmental review process. In fact, today, staff from the county is bringing to the Board of Supervisors for their consideration a contract with the CEQA consultant that would be assisting the county to guide that environmental process. So the second thing we wanted to talk about with you today was a new element, and as I mentioned, that is the inclusion of Marburg into the procurement process. When the county issued the RFP, and that was in cooperation with the other cities, Marburg did not respond with a formal proposal. However, during the early scoping of the project, Marburg did submit a couple of letters to the county specifically requesting that their properties be considered as a site for the material recovery facility. So our original project was the Dirty MRF and the anaerobic digester all at Tehiguis. But with these letters, Marburg has requested that potentially we split the project, and so the MRF might be sited at one of their properties in downtown Santa Barbara, and the anaerobic digester would still be sited at the Tehiguis landfill. This option does add flexibility to to our project and to the participating jurisdictions, we feel that it makes sense to at least study it, and the environmental impact report will determine whether it makes sense and whether it's feasible from an environmental basis. It's important to note that, similar to the Mustang proposal, if any of these sites are selected as the site for the project under CEQA, there's still an entire entitlement process that comes on the heels of that, both the Marburg properties as well as the Mustang proposal would have to undergo. So for that reason, with the inclusion of Marburg, we have been working closely and now have brought in city planning staff to be full partners in this process at the table. Similar to Mustang, Marburg will also be required to prepare a formal proposal outlining the technical as well as the financial aspects of their project. And then staff from the participating jurisdictions would undergo the same level of technical and financial due diligence as well to figure out what kind of deal we would be looking at. As a result, also, the participating agencies will soon draft an agreement between the agencies and with Marburg that will outline the process of how we formally bring them into the procurement. It will discuss the types of information that Marburg would have to submit, the timelines and milestones for their submittal. It will also, consistent with the original terms and conditions of the RFP, will require Marburg to pay a refundable deposit as well as a non-refundable late fee to cover staff expenses for understanding their process and bringing them into the environmental review. The third topic we wanted to discuss with you today is the term sheet. And the term sheet is something that in concept staff has discussed with council several times. As we said before, the term sheet would be between Mustang Renewable Power Ventures, the vendor, and each of the participating jurisdictions. It would be approved by each of the decision-making bodies. And so, city staff intends to bring the term sheet to council for your consideration tentatively on December 18th. And concurrently, this month and next, the other participating jurisdictions will be bringing the similar term sheet to their elected bodies. It's also important to note that it's non-binding. The term sheet does not lock the city into any participation or does not require us to subsequently sign a contract with Mustang. It simply lays out the business terms to be negotiated and finalized after the environmental review process is complete. We've discussed these with you before, but these are the key business parameters that are inclusive in the term sheet. We've talked about the size and scale of the facility, the materials to be processed, the final tipping fees that our customers would pay through their curbside rates, project financing, the tonnage commitments that we'll be bringing to you in the next year or so, tonnage resets, all of the performance standards having to do with diversion and what is disposed and what is diverted, as well as the revenue sharing agreements for cost savings as well as for greater revenue than expected on things like biogas and on recyclable commodities. In addition to those key business parameters, the term sheet also includes an exclusive right to negotiate. And again, in the earlier versions of the term sheet, that exclusive right was between the participating agencies and Mustang for the project to be built at the Tehiguis landfill. But with the alternatives to be studied under CEQA, now that we're looking at other sites, and certainly with the inclusion of Marburg in the procurement process, we've amended the language of the exclusive right to address projects that are sited on county-owned property, which would include Tehiguis landfill or other county-owned properties such as the transfer station, but also on privately owned properties. And so if the decision makers opt for a private site and or the environmental impact report deems those preferable, we would have the flexibility then and a term sheet that allowed us to negotiate for a controlling interest of those properties as well. The term sheet also includes sunset provisions between the participating agencies and Mustang for how long we will grant an exclusive right and stay with one partner, as well as sunset provisions for how long the participating agencies would have to negotiate with a private property owner if that's what is selected. So we felt that it was important because, you know, there with these two, well, certainly with the new element of including Marburg in the procurement process, and then the subsequent changes to the term sheet having to do with both county-owned and non-county-owned sites, we wanted to cover those first because of the implications for how we then undergo environmental review. So now we'll spend some time on the environmental review process. A little bit of background on CEQA. That's the California Environmental Quality Act, and as you all are aware, it requires public agencies to identify the significant impacts of a project and try to avoid or mitigate those impacts where possible. And similar to most other projects that come to you for consideration, the Resource Recovery Park is also subject to the Environmental Quality Act as well. There are a lot of players in the CEQA process. The lead agency in this case is the County of Santa Barbara. And the solid waste agency under Public Works will be the contract administrator of the contract with the environmental consultant that will help the county to prepare and circulate and respond to the EIR. The project proponent in this case is also the County of Santa Barbara, but specifically the Public Works Department. The vendor is Mustang Renewable Power Ventures, and then the responsible agencies that would be commenting on the breadth and scope of the EIR will include the City of Santa Barbara as well as many other regulatory agencies to whom the draft EIR will be circulated for their input. As I said before, the city is a responsible agency. We have been involved in the drafting or the commenting on the project description, the breadth of the EIR scope, and certainly the alternatives to be studied. And as I said previously, we have brought in the city planning department to take a very large role in that review. So what is the project? So we're going to talk about two different pieces of the environmental review. One is the project. That's the base project to be studied. And as I said previously, that's the material recovery facility at Tehiguis. The MRF will process all of the incoming trash that's collected from our carts, cans, and dumpsters. It will sort those then into recyclables, organic material, and then the residual that we would bury. And it would also include an anaerobic digester, which would digest that organic material, make biogas for electric power, and then the digestate would be made into various grades of soil amendment. And again, for the base project, all of these two components, the material recovery facility and the anaerobic digester, would be sited at Tehiguis landfill. If it's easier to follow that in a visual form, this little chart here shows the MSW, that's the municipal solid waste. All the material that's in the trash can comes into the MRF. It all gets sorted into, at the top there, the recyclables. They're pulled out and sent to market to generate revenue. The organic piece is separated out of the MRF, goes into the anaerobic digester, and that's made into soil amendments and gas. And the remaining, the residual that we really can't do anything with, would continue to be landfilled. I won't go through this list, just to show that the list of areas to be evaluated under the environmental impact report is extensive. The EIR, in addition to evaluating the environmental impacts of the base project, also requires us to look at alternatives. And so this is probably not an exhaustive list of alternatives, but we will be looking at the no project or no action alternative, and that's what if we were to do nothing and continue to landfill our waste at current rates. We'll also look at alternate project locations, and as I mentioned, that will include properties owned by Marburg. We'll also look at alternative technologies, and as you recall, the original RFP talked about conversion technology, things like technologies such as gasification and plasma arc and all these fancy words. We will be looking at alternative technologies as well as one of the alternatives under the EIR. We'll look at the impacts of expanding to Higuis, and then also looking at transporting our waste to other landfills in and out of the county. And then with every other, or as is similar to every other EIR, we'll also set forth the mitigation measures to mitigate the significant impacts that are identified. So when we talk about alternatives, we talked about specific alternative locations. We'll be looking at three now that we've identified. One is the Marburg C&D facility that is in existence and operating now. It is not a dirty MRF. It was built as a construction and demolition debris MRF, but Marburg is proposing to use that same site to then construct the advanced MRF that we would be using today. They've also identified another site, which is a cement factory on 500. And then the county is also looking at other South Coast locations, more in the urban area as well. So for these locations, these alternative locations, while they are not the project, they're not the base project under the EIR, they will be studied at a level that would allow you as decision makers to select them when the EIR is certified. So it gives us that flexibility that we were talking about. The third location is one that we had originally brought up in June when we came to you, and that was an alternative treatment of the organics, which is traditional composting at the city's current composter, Ingle and Gray in Santa Maria. And for this site, for this alternative location, we will start by studying air quality and the traffic and circulation impacts to a much greater detail than what you'd see in other alternatives in an EIR. If this option then appears to be viable, then we could certainly undertake the remaining study that would be required to bring it up to a level where the decision makers could select that site as well. So the environmental impact process is going to cost some money, and as we had discussed back in June, the original RFP called for the vendor to cover the cost of the EIR. But in subsequent discussions with the multi-jurisdictional task group and among the participating agencies themselves, we felt that the agencies would have greater flexibility in the use of those environmental documents that are produced if we pay for it rather than having a vendor pay for it. And so that's where we are today. It will be paid for through a temporary tipping fee increase for about 3 years. We're estimating the cost of the tipping fee increase to be about $2.45 per ton, although that'll be adjusted at the end for true costs. And for city residents and businesses that pay their curbside trash collection rates, we're anticipating that to be about a 0.64% increase in the first year on their garbage bills. So to put that in context, the city generally raises the customer rates by about 2 or 2.5% per year for the CPI adjustment and for the normal tipping fee increase that occurs. And this would add about 0.64% onto that 2 or 2.5% standard increase that we already do. So if that's approved, we will reflect that temporary tipping fee increase into the recommended budget for the Solid Waste Fund in fiscal year 2014. So as we begin to, as we set to initiate the environmental review process, there are a couple milestones and deadlines that we're working to hit. The first, as I mentioned today, is that the contract for the environmental impact report consultant was brought to the County Board of Supervisors for consideration today. We anticipate it's our estimate that the environmental review process will take about 21 months following approval of the EIR consultant contract. So we are anticipating that the draft EIR would be released for public comment in fall of 2013. And as is consistent with city protocol, we'll be working with the city planning department to bring that draft EIR to the planning commission. And then in summer of 2014, we anticipate bringing the final EIR back to council to make findings on that. And as I mentioned, in December, next month, we'll be bringing to you the term sheet for consideration between the city and Mustang as well. And just in conclusion, I know we went through this fairly quickly, but at this point, I think that there is consensus among the participating agencies that the project's on the right track. Through having an exclusive right to negotiate that addresses both private and county-owned lands, as well as having alternatives studied in the environmental impact report that make sense, that may have promise and viability where the trash is generated, and also deferring those financial terms till after the CEQA process. At least staff here feels that we are maintaining the appropriate level of flexibility that we need to end up with a good project. So with that, we'd be glad to take any questions.
Thank you. Do we have any speaker slips on this? No? So really, comments, questions? We don't need a motion or anything today. It's just receiving the report. So why don't we start at one end and work our way down? Ms. Maria?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you, Mr. for your work on this and for your presentation today. You had a slide up there. It said project description, and then it had the recyclables going to market and the soil amendment coming out of the waste stream. So that was it? Yeah. So would the deal work that any value, any money that would be made out of that would come back to the project, a little for us, a little for the other players? And then would the soil amendment make money, or is that something that we try to give away?
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Moreno, you're correct in that the recyclable, the revenue that's generated off the recyclables is one of the financial inputs, the revenue generators for the project. It impacts the final tipping fees that we pay. It's an offset, a revenue offset to the costs that the costs that are associated with running the facility. The term sheet does outline revenue sharing agreements, however, where if the commodity markets, and they're volatile, but as they go up and as the value of commodities outstrips the assumptions for that recyclable revenue, there are provisions for the vendor to share that additional revenue with the participating agencies. So we do have that. And in terms of the soil amendment, that Mustang's original proposal did not count on deriving revenue off of that soil amendment. But this is also new technology, and I know that the vendor is looking at additional ways to clean up that digestate and potentially make it into a marketable commodity. When we went up to San Jose last spring, we saw similar efforts by another composter to clean up the digestate and to actually try to market that. So we'll see where that goes.
When you talk about it, thank you, expanding Tahigas, that means that it's permitted for a certain capacity right now, but there may be a little more room somewhere else, another little part of the canyon. Is that what you're talking about?
That's correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
And we're about to enter a hauling agreement with Marburg. What is the intersection of that relationship with, if Marburg is engaged with this?
Sure. So the way that we are drafting the draft agreement with Marburg, we have considered this project in the context of the hauling agreement, and we have developed language that would allow the city to redirect its trash stream to another facility. So currently Marburg takes some business loads to their MRF, and they sort those, and it improves the city's diversion rate. But if this project is built, we would have the ability then to direct Marburg to pick up the trash and take it directly to the MRF without any intermediate sorting, so that all that rich material stays in the load and we deliver the type of material that Mustang would be expecting.
Okay, and you say that Marburg did not respond to the first RFP way back when. Do you know why that is?
They did not respond, and I don't know why they didn't.
And in terms of cost and the 0.64 that's going to go up, I'd just like the public to know that finding a new landfill is way more expensive than maybe this little bit of rate hike that's going up. And you and I had a conversation about that when I had a question about that. So can you talk a little bit about the economy of what we're trying to do here? We're trying to extend the Tahigas capacity, right, with this, and it's going to cost a little bit of money.
That's correct. We don't know the final tipping fees for this project, but we do know that the current tipping fee is about $77 a ton. Certainly one of the goals of the RFP was to extend the life of Tahiguas, but also to do so, at the best cost to the ratepayer. And so those tipping fees will be finalized, but certainly, shipping waste out of county, out of state, developing new landfills are very expensive propositions. And so where you can extend the life of a landfill and do it economically at the least impact to the ratepayer, seems to make sense.
Right, and the increase in the rate will go toward the environmental review and for this project. So
that's correct.
Thank you. Those are my questions, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Mr. House.
Just on the last piece there, and thanks, Mr. Ford, for your presentation. On the rate increase, that's not seen as a tax that has to go before a vote of the people or something. That's like a water rate increase. Is that in that category?
That's correct. We will notice this temporary rate increase in the exact same method that we notice all of the customer rate adjustments every year.
Now, it's a tipping fee, meaning that we or whomever's using that will be paying it, and then I'm guessing that that gets backed into our rates.
Yes.
That's not the rate. It's just that's what the tipping fee is going to go up, and then we'll have to go through some process of adjusting our actual rates for the ratepayers.
That's true. The tipping fee usually represents about 35% of the overall customer rate, and so this would be 0.6. This would be $2.45 on one piece of the overall customer rate.
I see. And then if you put that, there's diagrams there. I just want to be sure I get it, because you had said something about, and I think you explained it, but I missed it. When you said there might be two locations in one scenario where the downtown facility over in Lower East Side industrial area, that would be the MRF there, and then the other would be out at Tahigas. And where would that get divided up? Would that divisions begin at the MRF and then, please?
Sure.
You may have just said that, but I just
no. That's fine. I can say it again. So if the MRF were sited at a downtown location, then similar to this graph here, the trash would come into the MRF. It would still all come into the MRF. It would be separated into these streams. The recyclables would come out of the MRF and currently would go down to port in Long Beach or LA, just like we do now. The organic stream would then be loaded onto trucks and transported from Santa Barbara up to Tahiguas, where they would then be put into the anaerobic digester and made into electricity and made into soil amendments. The residual then that would come out of the MRF would also be transported up to Tahiguas and buried.
Okay, thank you. And then I'm having some deja vu here. I may have asked this question before, but it sort of strikes me. If we're building a freeway, we'll go through an entire process like this, and at some point, then the contractors will be selected to put the concrete down and do all that kind of work. But in this process, we've selected the vendor before we've gone through that entire process, it appears. So what's the distinction here, and is there an opportunity, or would there be an opportunity once we go through all of this, for somebody else to look at all this and make a proposal that could be in competition with the vendor that's been selected to go through this with us?
I see Mr. Wiley wanting to speak to this.
It's maybe heresy right now, and I'm sorry, but I just want to get it clear for myself. Yeah.
Madam Mayor, Councilmember House, it's a good question, and it gives us a chance to explain that while Mustang and now even Marburg are meeting with county staff, city staff, the public participants, they're not selected officially. This won't be a contract. This won't be binding, whether it's the county or the city of Goleta, until the end of the process, until, in particular, the environmental impact report is completed and certified and then used. So Mustang was the preferred vendor through the county RFP process. Marburg is now in that process as well. But there's no binding contract. They're not selected yet. But it's just the nature of a large public-private project like this. You have to, go from the large to the small, and each step of and with a private participant, they want to know that they're on the right path, and they want the public agency to tell them they're on the right path, that they're the preferred vendor. But there's no contractual obligation to Mustang or Marburg at this point. And there can't be, of course, until the environmental review is completed.
It's a very interesting process. I mean, I'm sure it's done everywhere. It seems odd here. And the idea of the request for proposals must have been to walk through this process with us kind of hand in hand, but have no guarantee at the other end. And I'm sure it puts them in a position of being a very strong contender because they've been along with it and seen all the ins and outs. But I guess you're saying there is a point at which there's an opportunity for other organizations to bid on the process and to have an opportunity at it.
Well, yes, but that would be difficult. Let me just say Matt mentioned the term sheet and the exclusive right to negotiate, which is an element of the term sheet. That's a very typical document for a project of this size and for a public-private partnership, that you have this non-binding document that essentially says we're all on the same page. We're all talking about the same location. We're all talking about the same vendor, the same project, anaerobic digestion, MRF, that sort of thing. You might even get into the actual business terms. In this case, we don't feel it's to the city's advantage to do that yet until the environmental review process. But a term sheet is that non-binding document where you make sure you're all on the same page, and then it's not unusual, it's not inappropriate in any way for the private partner to say, I would like to know that you're not going to be talking to anyone else about, in this case, about Tehiguis as a location. And so I've got an exclusive right to negotiate with the county and the other cities for a project at Tehiguis for a certain period of time. And we're supportive of that. We've tweaked it a little bit in that we've carved out Marburg locations, and the exclusive right doesn't apply to those locations as well.
All right, thank you. So the great moment of decision was the request for proposals and being in on that early step in the whole vetting process, and that was where that moment.
And I'm sorry, just to finally get to your, really, it's a practical matter. As I said, there's no binding contract. And if the time came, the environmental process was completed, and whether it's Santa Barbara or the county or Goleta says, we're not on board with this project, you could do that, and then at that point you could entertain other proposals. We're structuring a process that wouldn't make discussions with other entities or any other private entities appropriate until after that decision.
I see. Or if Mustang themselves decided that after they looked at all the information's in it, they needed to step aside. Now, I have no one in mind. I'm not talking like that. But I'm trying to ask questions for the public to make sure this process seems fair. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Mr. Hotchkiss?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. A lot of moving parts in this, and maybe even more down the line, I guess. Lead agency is the county, but we are a full partner, correct?
That's correct.
In essence, we started with Mustang, and we're sort of blending Marburg into it, possibly, but not assuredly, to see how it works. Correct? Have I described that accurately?
That's correct.
Okay. Mustang was originally going to pay for the EIR 1 point whatever it was million, right? And the $2.45 per ton tipping fee now is meant to make up for they're dropping out of that part, so that would supply to 1 point whatever it is million for the EIR. So we have now saved them that money. Have they forgiven us for that amount in some other part of this project?
You want to take it?
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Hotchkiss, that the money that they would have incurred, the cost that they would have incurred for the EIR, Mustang in this case, that was built into their eventual project and rate of return that they would have asked for in the project. So they would have recovered those monies ultimately anyway. We're just deciding to pay for it ourselves, or at least our ratepayers ourselves. It giving us the flexibility to do what we want with that EIR ultimately.
Yeah, I see the legal advantage of that. I'm just trying to see if I can save taxpayers some money here. So I guess what you're saying, it's either now or later.
That's right. I think it doesn't save them money, it just gives us flexibility.
Okay. I'm sure Mustang didn't let me ask that question, but my apologies. All right, I had to find it out because I think people should understand that. That's all I have. Thank you very much.
Mr. White?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. There was a regional meeting where we heard some of this similar information, what was that, a week or two ago. And I asked the question then, and I'll just repeat it now, that to allude to Nick Welch's piece of, was that a month or so ago, that, or a month to 2 months ago, that described alternatives, particularly landfill options that might be less expensive than Tehiguis. And that as this effort goes forward, the comparative costs of looking regionally will be part of this effort. Is that, I got it at that meeting that that would be the case, and I just wanted to get that reassurance from our own team that that would be occurring.
That, Madam Mayor, Councilmember White, that will be occurring. It will not occur in the context of the environmental impact report, but it's a study that the county and the participating agencies have already begun and will continue.
Great. Okay. Thank you.
Mr. Rouse?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Mr. Four, I'm going to kind of piggyback on one of Ms. Murillo's questions with that chart. Okay. And you referred before about the soil amendment being a marketable product as opposed to a giveaway product or whatever. Does that mean it's closer to organic compost? And if so, is there MRF technology out there that's the new hot thing that takes the organics to the level where that is going to become closer to a marketable compostable product?
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Rouse, technologically, yes. One of the constituents of concern that we have is small bits of glass in digestate and things. So before you put a soil amendment down where it goes on crops or where people could be walking, for example, in a playground or a park, glass is of major concern. There's emerging technology, things called, it's a vendor called Titech. It's essentially a scanner that looks for glass and will kick it out. That technology has gotten better and better at capturing smaller and smaller shards of glass. So that's one area where we're seeing improvement on the technological end. The other is something that we're still working on, and that's the quality of the digestate coming out of an anaerobic digester. You know, what else is in the organic material from the trash can that we would need to be worried about? And so, you know, other things that you might find in the trash can, like cleaners and, you know, bleach and things like that. How do those react in an anaerobic digester? So the toxicological components of the digestate are still something that we're looking at. The good news is that there are more vendors that are doing this very thing. And as I said, when we went to San Jose, they are not using an anaerobic digester facility, but they're using anaerobic digestion as a technique. And we are seeing that they are making progress in cleaning up the digestate to a level where right now they're confident that, for example, growers of grazing land and things will take the material. The next big facility to come online in the coming months will be the city of San Jose, and that's where we will get a very, very good understanding of the character of the digestate coming out and to what level can it be cleaned up and what are the marketing opportunities. So we're waiting anxiously for that facility to come online with San Jose, and we'll know a whole lot more at that point.
But that assumes also that the organics we collect at source separation are pure. I mean, do we do something about separating or sifting through those before they go to, for example, to England Gray?
Well, the biggest difference with source separated material is that, for example, the glass is of much less concern. You know, when we set up a restaurant or a cafe or something with food scraps, we train them and they sign a contract that they will keep glass out of their material, and they do a very good job. You know, our source separated food is some of the highest quality source separated organics I've ever seen. So we do a much better job than Paradise Cafe included. So
thank you, man.
But we see a much different composition of material in source separated food than we do in just a trash can in general.
Okay, very good. Last question, it's a little bit off that track, but given the alternative proposals and given the original proposal by Mustang at Tahigas, are there any timeline differences we're looking at the final outcome of being online with any of these projects, depending on what alternative is chosen, that you're aware of? Or is that just, I mean, it's all obviously, the CEQA stuff notwithstanding, going online, is there a difference at any level?
Well, the two areas that could add time would be our ability to receive technical information and design drawings and engineering and specs and a financial proposal from Marburg. So how quickly can we receive that, and how quickly then can the participating agencies conduct our due diligence investigation and vet that proposal? And so what we're focusing on now is getting the site engineering and the layout of the facilities and what properties will be used, so that we can then incorporate that into the EIR. You know, that's our first goal. And then concurrent with the EIR, we could be doing a similar level of technical and financial investigation on the proposal. So I think it could very well add some time, but if we all hustle, it doesn't need to take a whole lot longer because the two processes are concurrent.
All right, thank you.
How big is the MRF, whether it's at Tahigas or anywhere else? Do we know?
What is an acre?
65,000 square feet. Is that what I heard? You want to come up? You have to state your name for the record, Mr.
John Dewey, Mustang Power.
Thank you.
Our proposed MRF building at Tahigas was 65,000 square feet. Interestingly, that's approximately the same size as Marburg's existing C&D facility.
Okay, just to put in context there. Thank you. Okay. Well, that was just kind of, I want to lead in terms of the county has done a tremendous amount of work reaching out to the community on this process, and this other idea of alternate locations has come in as part of some of those meetings, and I'm wondering if moving forward with the environmental review, if we should do a little more outreach with the potential of a location in the city area. I would hate for, let's say, the decision is for that to happen, but then there's some outcry to say, no way do we want the location that, so just like what part of the conversation has been talking about Tahigas, because there's certainly concerns by some about the amount of activity and construction going on at Tahigas. So, and I would think that would fall upon your department's shoulders and not the county in terms of reaching out to the community. I'm not quite sure how that should take shape, or in maybe as it comes closer to time before the hearing at the Santa Barbara City Planning Commission for the CEQA review. That probably makes sense, that people aren't just thinking of Tahigas when that review comes here, that people are aware of the full scope of the project. So that won't be until next fall, it sounds like. But I just want to put that in there now as part of a outreach early, because I think that will be good information to have as part of the Planning Commission review. I really want to commend all of you and Mr. Wiley in particular and Mr. Armstrong, and county staff too. Now, it's not just a one-sided thing, and Mustang, everyone involved. That the questions still left on the table back in June, I think, were pretty significant when it came to a term sheet and negotiations and what order were things going to go. And I know myself and Supervisor Carbajal were kind of being very noisy about, well, let's get this settled, and you did. I think you really captured a lot of the issues that were still loose ends, and I look forward to seeing the product when it comes to us in December, because I think we're now really all on the same page of moving forward, so we can finally research something that we've been talking about for a very long time, and the longer we wait, the more trash fills up Tehiguis. So, time is of the essence here. So thank you all for a lot of work I know that everyone's done in the last few months. Any other comments or? Okay, this is just receiving a report. So thank you very much. Thank you all for being here. Any council member committee assignment reports? Ms. Murillo.
Thank you. I was at the Youth Council meeting last night, and our Youth Council is hosting a regional conference with youth leaders, and they'll be tackling issues such as bullying and social media, and I'll have a longer report. Well, not a longer report, but an update next time. Thanks.
Mr. Rouse.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. At the regular meeting of the Downtown Parking Committee, the financials were reviewed for the quarter, and while things are reasonably good, kind of following the trend lines of sales tax and whatnot, there is some concern about the ongoing expense by the committee, especially in light of the RDA going away, which was backfilling some of the expense going forth to the Streets Clean program. So I believe that the committee will be forwarding a letter to council sometime in the near future.
Mr. Hotchkiss.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. A couple of things. First off, I went to the Collaborative Courts graduation in the mural room at the county, as I told you, in conference the other day, and it was really wonderful and very impressive. Normally we think, at least maybe it's my personal prejudice, but you think you're going to see a lot of younger people and all that. Across the board, could have been grandmothers, probably was, young people, people from every part of the world, really. Some, not even in somebody from out in the Pacific, and all very grateful to have found something that they could grab onto to pull themselves up and out of really awful situations that they admitted themselves had gotten themselves into. And the thing that really struck me was there was no sense of victimization. There was no sense of, I'm sorry for myself. These were all people, I think Mr. Burke could probably speak to this, that were proud of what they were doing and admitted they made a mistake. And we're moving on. Boy, that is just great stuff to see. I was moved to tears on occasion. The other thing was, jeepers, there's so many things to report on here. Sorry. The Maritime Museum had a really interesting program about, I had no idea, maybe you all knew better than I, that what a key part that this city has played in deep sea diving. And so their display and program last Friday or Thursday, or Friday it was, highlighted that and showed what a significant part we have played. We're a small city on the West Coast, big time city when it comes to that profession. And finally, the Veterans Day Memorial, perhaps you would like to speak to that.
You can go ahead.
The whole Veterans Weekend was pretty impressive, including, I wasn't at the ball, but I guess people had fun. But we were at a memorial at the Veterans Building on Sunday where the mayor spoke very movingly about the unity of our country demonstrated in the people that were sitting in the crowd. And I was asked to say just a brief word because I was the only elected, I think, veteran there. And I pointed out that while it was a burden and a challenge to be a veteran, it was also a privilege, one that probably at the time when one was doing it, you didn't realize. But subsequently, you came to really appreciate. That's certainly been the case for me. End of report. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Mr. White.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Your thunder is everywhere, but we get to steal, I guess, little bits of it. But in any case, the Bradley Studios ribbon cutting was last Wednesday, where our mayor spoke movingly about the new facilities that were there, that have been created there, both for people graduating out of homelessness and moving sort of really up into more permanent home situations. That's part of the services that are, or the resource that new project is providing, as well as downtown workers. And so it's just it's poignant in that that's one of the last of the RDA based projects that's coming online, and it is a beautiful one, and it's on the corner of Haley and Bath, or just up from the corner of Haley and Bath, and it certainly is worth our citizens dropping by to have a look at it. It's a beautiful complex, and it does also provide some additional setbacks from Mission Creek, so there's a 2-for-1 there a little bit. That there was an apartment building that was slammed up right next to the creek, and that was taken down, and the whole complex is set back further from the creek, more in concert with what is trying to be done with the whole Mission Creek master plan. So, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. House?
And that was just a beautiful project. I couldn't go to the Yes Store opening on your behalf. Who did?
Ms. Murillo did.
Ms. Murillo, thank you very much for doing that. Thank you.
Been
What
busy this week.
A joyful opportunity. I sad I had to miss it. I went to the Transportation Circulation Committee meeting the other day, and actually you came in after the other thing that you're at, and I got a little preview of the 6-year capital improvement program vis-a-vis the streets and all that infrastructure, and it's just amazing what our staff is working on, and how they organize it and triage and do what they need to do. But there's an awful lot in the pipe on that, and they had a chance to weigh in on it. But also they looked at the Cliff and Las Positas intersection, and looked at alternatives that were being proposed for that. And it was a very interesting discussion, because the roundabout that a lot of people have really expected there for a great long time is costing more than proposed to cost more than was expected, and yet in the face of that, they chose to unanimously support that option, and they were pretty clear about it and why. So it'll be very interesting to see how it goes. They actually gave the staff the encouragement to go forth and seek the funding over the next 6 months that would make up the difference. And I talked to Mr. Allen today, and he said he's working with SBCAG to do what they can to find that funding to make up the difference. And that's where we are.
It's been a busy week. I'll just end with congratulating the organizers behind the New Noise Music Conference and Festival that was throughout last weekend, including thanking our city PD and others involved with the street fair on Saturday. It was very crowded but very organized. The Mason Street from State over to Anacapa was closed off, and there was a stage and a number of bands and food trucks and all of that, and it really brought a lot of people out of the woodwork downtown, not to mention all the musical venues those 3 nights as well. So that good kudos. I thought that brought a lot of more people downtown, and I think I know the city's Events and Festivals Committee, we gave a grant towards that because it's outside the high season, as they say. So that's the purpose of those kind of grants. Mr. House?
Just pick up on that. This morning, Mr. Rouse and I were at the Downtown Organization board meeting, and Ginny Brush gave a report. But just it was amazing how many people there were asking for those pianos on State Street to be not just an annual event, but like all the time or something, where she explained how hard it is to put that together and how complex it is. But there was just so much support for that remarkable fun thing on State Street. It is pretty cool to go down there and see, just see somebody playing those pianos, come and gone.
Right.
She did hint that maybe there'd be a chance to do it more than once a year, but we'll see.
Okay, a lot going on. Okay, we're in recess. We'll be back at 6 o'clock.
Murillo?
Here.
Rouse? Here. White? And Mayor Schneider?
Here. I have 2 public comment speaker slips. This is for items not on the agenda. Everyone else here for their interviews, you don't need to fill this out. So we have 2 minutes here at the podium. We'll start with Lucille and Daniel Ramirez. Come on up, and then Russell Ruiz.
Honorable Mayor and Council members, my name is Lucille Ramirez. I'm here with my husband, Daniel Ramirez, and we're here just to thank you actually for the city's affordable housing program. Because of the program, we were actually able to purchase a home in Santa Barbara. So kind of a big deal. My entire career has been in public service, so I almost assumed that I would never be able to afford a home in Santa Barbara. But because of this program, I am now a homeowner. So I'm very excited and just really want to thank you for this program. So thank you.
I would also just like to echo what my wife just said, and being local here in Santa Barbara, it is truly a blessing, and I'm so elated that the City and Council promotes a program like this, and we have this here in Santa Barbara, where a local like myself can be a homeowner, and keep up the great work. And I just would like to just say, if you can promote it or market it a little bit more, it'd be great, because I know there's more well-deserving families out there, but thank you for the great job, and thank you for the program.
Thank you. Russell Ruiz.
Good evening, Madam Mayor, members of the council. Since I'm here on the next item, I thought I'd just take a moment to recognize, compliment, and thank Parks and Recreation staff for the just completed Mesa Lane Steps project. We live at the first address on the beach end of Mesa Lane, so it's a project I was very interested in. From its inception through the approval process and during construction, staff was very cooperative in giving me all the information I was interested in and then keeping me posted on status. As you know, there was a practical necessary part of the project, and that was executed well, but what I was particularly impressed with is the overall project was really done nicely. And I think I can tell you that in being done nicely, I don't think we spent any more money. It's just a very high-quality project that is worthy of a City of Santa Barbara Parks project. It looks great, and again, I think it looks great without having cost any more money. And so the other thing they did well was getting it done on an aggressive schedule. Heavily used recreational facility. It was important that the steps not be closed for very long, and they accomplished that. So thank you to Parks and Rec staff for a job well done.
Thank you. Okay, that concludes public comment. On to item number 13. If you want to read that.
Item number 13, interviews for city advisory groups.
Great. So this is the second of 3 different opportunities we have for applicants to come to talk about why they are interested in volunteering on one of the many boards and commissions, or reapply if that's the case. And so first I want to thank you for applying, and we really appreciate the volunteer work that so many residents give to the City of Santa Barbara. It makes our jobs a lot easier in many, many ways, and your input is really important. The way I'm going to go do this is very easy. Go through each committee name, and so if you are an applicant for that committee, just come on up to the podium. I won't have the clock running. Just, express your interest, and if you're asking for reappointment, you might want to talk about what things you liked or could be improved, or whatever it is you'd like to talk about in your first term and why you're interested in reapplying. If you're applying for more than one committee, you can do both at the same time. So the first committee you hear that you're applying, then come on up and you can do both of them at that point. But before we start, I also want to acknowledge Brenda here at our city clerk's desk. This is your last meeting. Actually, tomorrow's your retirement party, and particularly appropriate and thankful that you are here tonight, because you have been the key person in the city clerk's office to get all the details involved with our appointments process, and updating the resolutions, making sure everyone gets their notices on time about appointments, and keeping everything in line. So thank you, and congratulations to you on your retirement. So.
Madam Mayor?
Yes, Mr. House.
Brenda, I really want to thank you and appreciate you, too. You helped us in putting together that wonderful little brochure about being on one of the boards or commissions in the city, and really try to get the word out and drum up interest and let the people know what the opportunities are. So thank you very much. And it's been really wonderful working with you for all these years.
You're welcome. Now get to work. Okay. Okay. We'll start with the Access Advisory Committee. Anyone here for that? Okay. The Airport Commission. Architectural Board of Review. Come on up. Nope. Doesn't matter. Yeah. Either way. Just state your name up front, and then go on from there.
Good evening, Madam Mayor and council members. My name is Scott Hopkins, and I'm here to interview for a position on the ABR. A bit about myself. I'm a licensed architect, a member of the AIA, and a lead accredited professional. I have an undergraduate degree in fine art and a master's degree in architecture from the University of Washington. I've been practicing architecture for over 20 years, the last 10 of which have been here in Santa Barbara. and I'm currently an associate architect at Piker Group Architects. I've presented before the city's architectural review boards on numerous occasions, and actually have watched countless hours on TV. I'm certainly a proponent of the review process. I think it has an important role in maintaining the beauty and character of Santa Barbara. Santa Barbara really has a unique architectural fabric, and I think any new structure needs to carefully consider its place within that fabric. I think that the role of the ABR is really to encourage architects to do their best work. And I think that the guidelines and procedures of the ABR are generally considered fair to all parties. And if asked to serve, I'd like to think that I would follow those procedures and curtail my comments to items within the purview of the ABR, most notably mass bulk scale, design, detailing, and materials. Summing up, I like to think that I'm a reasonable, fair, courteous person. I love the city of Santa Barbara. I have a passion for architecture. And I think I've lived here long enough that it's time for me to give something back to the city. So it would be my honor to serve on the ABR. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Mr. Hotchkiss.
Quick question. Deddy does a lot of work in the city. So if you were on the ABR and a project of his came up, you realize you just have to bail out from A to Z.
I have considered that. And currently we only have one project that may be affected. And I had a conversation with Scott Vincent about that. And it's the Garden Court project. And my understanding is that the city would be providing the land but not hiring the professionals, so there wouldn't be a conflict of interest there. And there's nothing else on the horizon.
Thank you. Any other questions? Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay. Come on up.
Madam Mayor, members of City Council, good evening. My name is Howard Wittosh, and I'm here to express interest in serving on the City Architectural Board of Review. I agree with the previous candidates' comments entirely. But just to state my own case, I'm a California registered architect and civil engineer, and have been in private practice in Santa Barbara since 1978. I previously served on the City Landmarks Commission, Historic Landmarks Commission, Sign Committee, and the Building and Fire Code Board of Appeals. As a design professional, I represent clients and have appeared on their behalf before various design review boards on numerous occasions over the years. I'm familiar with the regulatory environment and review process and have the skills necessary to serve on the board. The ABR was established in 1925 to guide reconstruction of the city after the earthquake. Today, the ABR reviews and approves all commercial and multifamily residential projects in the city, including projects adjacent to historic resources and structures. Neighborhoods such as the Mission, Hillside, Bungalow, and Highway 101 Coastal Parkway districts are also described in the city's ABR ordinance. Transitional neighborhoods such as the Waterfront, Funk Zone, Haley Milpas, and Outer State Street corridors and Cottage Hospital contain great architectural diversity and richness and are quite literally Santa Barbara's building blocks and the threads of its urban fabric. The city has commissioned numerous studies which document these areas and suggest how they might be developed over time, with the underlying theme of neighborhood preservation. The studies are vital to ABR members and staff in determining project compatibility, and design guidelines which apply to all districts still recognize the unique features of each. Future development poses the greatest single challenge to the ABR simply because applications are reviewed case by case. Strong design guidelines and review standards are needed that apply to more than a single district, that are not defined by any one style, and that will outlast any one member's term. While ABR is concerned more with urban design than with planning, and it should be, members still need to be aware of the agendas for the Historic Landmarks Commission, Single Family Design Board, modifications, and for projects being appealed to the Planning Commission and City Council. Strong design guidelines and review standards are, however, only one way for the ABR to meet the above challenges. Another is through the composition of the ABR itself. The board is comprised of a total of 7 members, 3 laypersons, 4 design professionals, who bring together many years of experience, knowledge, and expertise, and who provide a balance between pragmatism and vision. Maintaining a dialogue between diverse board members and applicants that is civilized and respectful, the ability to identify and articulate the issues surrounding each project, to remain objective and open to new ideas, and to find a way to reach consensus in spite of differing points of view are as important as knowledge and expertise. I'm aware of the time commitment required to serve on ABR. Since I am semi-retired, I do not anticipate my attendance at meetings or having to abstain due to conflict of interest will be issues. I look forward to returning to the community, some of what I have learned, and much of what I care about. In concluding, Santa Barbara is unique among California cities, and some argue in the world. Carved in the stones of the courthouse arch in Latin are the words, "God gave us the land, and man built the town." One has only to look around Santa Barbara to see how much is attributable to those who built this place. Our community deserves sensitive design and thoughtful planning, and the ABR and its design review process are one way to ensure that happens. When it is all said and done, we can still think of this place as our Santa Barbara. I can answer any questions you have.
Thank you. Any questions? Yes, Mr. House?
Mr. Wadash, you've served on, you mentioned HLC before,
Yes.
as well as Sign Committee. And would you just take a minute and share with us how you see the distinction between the two and how you will see your role in ABR distinct from HLC?
HLC is really for the purpose of preserving the historic fabric of the El Pueblo Viejo district, which is defined in the ordinance. ABR is, the purview of ABR is a much larger area, adjacent to the El Pueblo Viejo, but including a lot of the areas that I mentioned in my talk. Areas that are very diverse, areas that have different histories, different layers of architectural history. So I don't think that as a ABR member that we would be in the business of preserving the architecture that is in the El Pueblo Viejo. However, we would be mindful that it is there, and when we are adjacent to it, or when projects come close, we would want to make sure that there is some relationship.
Okay, great. Thank you very much.
Any other questions? No. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Anyone else for ABR? Okay. Community Development and Human Services. Downtown Parking. Fire and Police Commission. Fire and Police Pension Commission. Harbor Commission, come on up. Good evening.
Good evening, Madam Mayor, council members. My name is Bill Spicer, and I'm looking for reappointment to the Harbor Commission. I'm currently serve as the vice chair of the commission. You asked what are the things I liked about it or the accomplishments, and I've thoroughly enjoyed working with staff when we're faced with challenges or problems, looking for collaborative solutions that we feel best help everyone in the harbor. I'm very proud of Santa Barbara that I believe the harbor is a real jewel for us. The fact that we have a working harbor is something that I think is important to keep that fabric for our city. It's the livelihood for a number of people, not just the merchants down there, but the fishermen. I've enjoyed also watching the three business units of the harbor and how they work together, the business, the facilities, and the operations, and getting to know that staff and see how they function as a cohesive unit. I personally, I'm a local businessman, and business has been what I do. Before applying some years ago for the Harbor Commission, I had a seat on the Channel Islands National Marine Sanctuary and worked with both Mike Murray and Chris Mobley there. I grew up in Oregon and spent many days as a recreational crab fisherman in the Pacific Ocean. And I'd answer any questions, but I'd be honored if I was reappointed to the Harbor Commission.
Mr. Hotchkiss.
You mentioned you were a local business, and what's the nature of your business? if I can ask?
A company in Goleta called Maps.com. I helped found it 20 years ago and still work there now.
Congratulations. Thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for your service. Historic Landmarks Commission? Library? Come on up. Sure, that's fine.
So, good evening. My name is Pam McMaster, and I'm applying for the Planning Commission, the Library Board, and the Rental Housing Mediation Task Force. And I have a slight preference for the Planning Commission, but honestly, I'd be honored to serve on any of them. A little bit about my background. I moved to Santa Barbara in mid-September after 35 years in D.C. working for the Central Intelligence Agency, CIA, as an analyst, and eventually as a senior manager there, and I'm now retired from the federal government. I did spend my early formative years in California. My father was in the Marine Corps, and he was stationed at Camp Pendleton. I spent my high school years in Laguna Beach, and I went to college at Stanford University, and I left Stanford with a BA in '76 for D.C. To work for the CIA, but I knew I would always return to California. So I knew I was a Californian at heart. I provided you with my admittedly long resume because I think intelligence analysis is not really a very well-known profession. And I wanted to give you a little more of a flavor of the kinds of skills that I have mastered over the past 35 years that I really think are directly relevant to working on these commissions. Now, I don't pretend to know, after a couple of months, all the details and the ins and outs of the workings of all the commissions. I've tried over the past month I've attended the Planning Commission, I've attended the Library Board, I've read all the minutes for all three commissions for the past year or so, and I have to tell you, it really became clear to me that a lot of the skills that I have developed are directly applicable. Commission members are foremost problem solvers. They must also be objective listeners, critical thinkers, excellent researchers, have strong sense of public service and public give back. It's, I think, a good thing that they've proven themselves to be good managers of something and really need to be scrupulous stewards of the public trust and public resources. And I will tell you, those are the skills that I have developed, nurtured, demonstrated, and mastered first as one of the first female Soviet military analysts in the 70s and 80s. And then when I left CIA, I was one of the 4 people that ran the Directorate of Intelligence, which is where all of the analysts reside. So I think I do have a long, successful career as a public servant. My job was to really drive collection, to then analyze and think through all the ramifications of that information, to lay out for the President and the Cabinet what were the pros and cons and how things were going to play out over the year, and really critically think through the implications, and then communicate all this either in writing succinctly or orally to the President and the Cabinet for their consideration. And I think if you think about it, there are a lot of similar, very strong similarities between what the commissions do in terms of the critical thinking and the objective looking at both sides of it and trying to come up with a decision and a solution that really works for everybody. I'm also a quick study. I think it's a definite challenge for commission members to stay on top of all the city policies, the bylaws, the laws, and I think I've shown myself to be adept at coming up to speed quickly on all of the key issues relevant to the decision at hand, and I can give you concrete examples of that. I am now completely retired. I can devote whatever time is necessary for any of these positions. As to why I'm interested, after a career of public service, I really want to continue to serve, albeit at a much less hectic pace than I have over the past 35 years. I really need to feel that I am doing something with my time that has impact. When I saw all of the 30 openings, I'll have to tell you, all of them interested me, so I knew I had to narrow it down, and I really narrowed it down to these 3 committees because these were issues, they are focused on issues that are important to me and that I am passionate about. So I know it sounds a little corny, but, you know, I've already fallen in love with this vibrant, fascinating, and diverse city, and I really want to be a part of keeping it charming, medium-sized, and situated in a beautiful physical location. And I have seen firsthand how Laguna Beach and Orange County more generally have really let development get out of hand. And I really admire Santa Barbara's commitment to strict zoning and development policies. So in closing, I understand I am a newcomer. I have a lot to learn. I would ask you to think about the balance and the people you have on a lot of these commissions, and many of them have been there for a long time and have lived here. And I would say that sometimes it's useful to have that outside perspective and some new thinking on some of the commissions. So with that, I would just like to thank you for giving me this opportunity and hearing me out. I'd be happy to address any additional questions or issues to the best of my ability.
Mr. Hotchkiss.
I'm not sure you're not overqualified for everything we have here, but
That's not at all true. Like I said, I have a lot to learn, and I'm enjoying learning it, too.
we don't have anything shaped like the Oval Office. So do you speak a language other than English?
I do. I speak French, and I speak Russian.
Thank you.
And I would actually like to take, I'm planning to take Spanish at the community college, because I think that will be a much more useful language for me now in my retirement here.
Ms. Maria?
Thank you. In terms of the rental housing mediation task force, are you a renter?
I am right now, I am a tenant, but I am actively looking to buy a house, so I could find myself in the next year, because I have a year's lease, buying a house, having to rent that out, and being a homeowner, a renter, and a landlord, so.
Thank you.
Mr. Hotchkiss, you had another question?
Perhaps we should speak afterwards. We'll see here.
He's a realtor. Well, yeah, I can't do this. No, seriously, right. Perhaps not. See if you got that on tape.
Oh, okay.
No, sorry. Can't do it.
Well, I have lots of questions I'm sure you're not allowed to answer, so
People,
about your
of
past.
course,
so-
lately have been saying, oh, my goodness, what about this Petraeus resignation? I said, you know, 2 things make me very happy that I left when I did. Superstorm Sandy and the Petraeus
There you go.
resignation. I think I got out of Dodge right at the right time.
Well, welcome to Santa
Thank
Barbara.
you very
and thank
much.
you for your application.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else for the library board? Okay. Metropolitan District Transit Board. Come on up.
Good evening, Madam Mayor and council members. My name is Olivia Rodriguez. I currently serve as a secretary for the Santa Barbara Metropolitan Transit District. This is, I was completing a term for another member who was unable to complete her term. And so I believe this time I've been on the board now for 2 years. And previously I served from 2003 until 2005 for about 3 years. And a little bit about myself. I know a few of you on the board, but I was pretty much raised in Santa Barbara. Came here at 6 months and took off to go to college and law school. Came back about in 2006 and have been here since then. I have 3 children, all of whom have taken the bus, and I have 2 who are now in college, and so those aren't, they drive a car, try to get them back on the bus. But I've been practicing law for 24 years in Los Angeles and here in Santa Barbara. I've done civil law, I've done immigration and criminal defense, which is with the 2 fields that I practice now. And I've been pretty involved in the communities, this community, Los Angeles, wherever I've lived since my 20s. I've been a community activist. I've served, I'm currently serving as a teen court judge, and I was previously on too many boards, and it was a bit overwhelming between 3 children, a private practice, and trying to have some sanity in my life. So at this time, I currently serve as a teen court judge, and the MTD secretary, which I love, both of the things that I do because they're near and dear to my heart. I'm asking for reappointment for the board, obviously, and I believe that some of the reasons that I'm a valuable asset to the board is because of the long time that I've served. I believe I have institutional memory that we're starting to lose a bit. We've lost Mr. Fonstock, who was an amazing board member. We've lost a couple other members, and I know that there's a couple other positions that are available, and we may be losing some other members. And I am concerned about the institutional memory that may be lost on the board if we have too much of a change, because there just are so many issues that are affecting the MTD at this time. And it's really important that we remember where we came from so that we don't make some similar mistakes. We are always trying to make it, you know, I think the biggest thing that I care about is the transportation needs of the city are very important, and that it remain affordable, reliable, easy to use, while still protecting the mandates given to us, the fiscal mandates given to us by the federal, state, and local agencies that we work with also. Unfortunately, we've had to raise our rates and have had to cut hours, but we've tried to do that in the to affect the least amount of members of our community, and I'm hopeful that we can continue to do that. I also bring diversity to the board. I'm the only Latina and the only female on the board, and I love the board that I serve with. They're all fabulous members. They all contribute. They all have something very strong to contribute, and so I really do enjoy working with them from all their diverse backgrounds. And you know, being an attorney and having my legal background has really served me on the board, and I believe I've been able to serve the board. There have been a lot of issues that have come up, you know, in negotiations for Calle Real. I serve on that ad hoc committee. I initially was involved with the initial Calle Real. We had a design review. We were going to try to build, I guess, in 2003, and that kind of fell through the cracks, but I'm on that ad hoc committee, and I think that there will be some major developments in the next couple of years with that property, and I would like to remain and provide my services to the MTD board. So basically, you know, I really enjoy serving. I think I bring a lot to the organization, and I'll answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you. Any questions? Thank you for your service. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Anyone else for MTD? Okay. Neighborhood Advisory Council. Come on up.
Good evening.
Good
I'm
evening.
Sally Foxon, and I am reapplying, and I would love to be back on the council. You know, being part of the first year was absolutely fabulous, and it's such a diverse board that, how can I say this? It's such a diverse board, and we are so alike, even though we're so different. We all want people in our neighborhoods to survive well, and to be a part of their neighborhood. I've been able to meet so many people that I would never have known before. And even though there might have been a little, you know, cat fight here and there, you know, within the council, not naming any names, but you know what? It's a good thing. Don't ask. It's good to help. It's such a great feeling to be able to be out there, to answer questions, and if not being able to refer somebody or to answer the questions, to be able to refer to somebody that can actually answer the questions, to help. You know, we've done a lot of work with the West Side, Lower West Side, East Side, Lower East Side, and it's just really rewarding, and it's great to see the smiles on their faces. And, you know, having only been there, as I said, for just the first year, I need to be there longer. You know, I need to be there and to give back to the community that I was born and raised in, born on the east side, raised on the west side. And I want to give back. And that's it.
Thank you for your service. It's certainly been
Thank you.
some growing pains on that committee in a good way, though.
To say the least.
Yeah, but
But we do well.
Yeah,
We do well.
you do good work. Any questions?
Not even one?
Keep the
Okay.
positive attitude. It works for you.
Well, thank you. I will try. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else for the Neighborhood Advisory Council? Parks and Recreation? Planning Commission?
Council members, Madam Mayor, my name is Linus Huffman. I'm a local licensed real estate broker, local developer, and I'm a landlord in both the city and the county. I reside in San Roque. I constructed a condominium project over on Olive Street a few years ago called Los Fuegos del Cielo, so I've been through the entire planning commission process and the building, and I built some city sewer main during that project and abandoned some sewer over there, and I'm familiar with the archaeological and architectural review processes that are necessary for the Planning Commission. I have some idea about the specific plan, and I'd like to offer my time to the Planning Commission for, offer my civic duty time.
We have on our notes that you've also applied to the Parks and Rec and Historic Landmarks Commission.
The
Is that-
Planning Commission, HLC, and Parks and Rec.
Okay, so either.
Historic landmarks, I was born a long time ago, not too far away at St. Francis Hospital, which isn't there anymore. And I am very familiar with most of the historic landmarks in town, I think. And I worked in community theater. I'm familiar with the theaters in town, Libero High School, junior high school. I attended all the schools and graduated from San Marcos. And I can offer a lot there. I'm an avid tennis player. I wish Las Positas was still the way it was, and I'm primarily interested in the Planning Commission.
Okay. Any other questions? Sure, go ahead.
Mr. Huffman, thank you for applying. So the Planning Commission, and, I was never on it, but I just know there's blueprints and there's so much documentation. So you're saying that you do have a mastery of
Yeah,
the process
I'm familiar with civil plans and architectural plans.
and,
In Title 24. I built a 3-condo project, and so that was a commercial project, and that was 4 stories tall over there on Olive Street near Carrillo in the 1000 block. So I'm familiar with plans, yeah.
Thank you.
Mr. Hotchkiss?
Quick question. Don't tell me what they are, but do you have some specific suggestions that you would make to improve the process that involves the Planning Commission? Don't tell me what they are.
No, I do have some ideas. I think there is some streamlining to be done. I'm a big fan of urban infill. It took me from 98 to 2005 to complete my project. So, I'm familiar with the length of that kind of project, and I'd be interested in streamlining that. But I think the process is thorough. There's some delays in there that are interesting, but I do have some ideas, yeah.
Thank you.
Other questions? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Planning Commission?
Thank you, Madam Mayor and Council members. Thank you for the opportunity to apply for this Planning Commission vacancy. I'm now a private consultant after retiring from the County of Santa Barbara about a year ago. I'm familiar with the Planning Commission meeting and site visit schedules. I understand the time requirements to prepare, attend, and follow up on agenda items. And I'm also committed to spending the time required to consider the public, the applicant, and the agency comments in preparation for those meetings. I've attended, commented, and followed several items at your Planning Commission over the years, and I am experienced with the role of the Planning Commission and how it fits in with the planning, the public, and with the legislative process. I've read and I understand and I have practical and professional experience with open meeting laws, conflict of interest laws, and parliamentary procedures. I've been a board member of a UCSB affiliate group, and I continue to be active in their scholarship program. I chaired a Peabody Charter School committee, and I served as PTA president in the past at Santa Barbara Junior High. I was appointed by your council to the Circulation Element Committee, and later served 6 years on your Transportation and Circulation Element Committee. I have 30 years professional planning experience and a master's degree in this field. I have experience with large and small land use development projects, including all the application types, conditions of approval, findings, compliance issues. I have experience in drafting and in implementing ordinances and land use policy, also other types of ordinances as well, and also have experience in preparing and implementing guidelines and procedures such as Board of Architectural Review documents and historic resources guidelines, that type of thing. I also, of course, have experience with all types of environmental documents, having drafted, analyzed, and reviewed and commented on all of those types of documents, large to small. I also have built working relationships with many of the agencies that planning typically works with, like SBCAG and Caltrans and local emergency service agencies and that sort of thing. I have working knowledge of planning laws, and I'm committed, very much committed to the importance of public participation and the hearing process. In closing, I'm a 40-year City of Santa Barbara resident. I went to college at UCSB. I raised my family here. Santa Barbara is livable, it's walkable, diverse, and beautiful. It connects the environment and engages the community at all sorts of levels. For me, life in this community means participation in that. I would look forward to making use of my career skills at the Planning Commission and in promoting an engaged and balanced community, as well as maintaining a balance between the community and its surrounding areas. I'm available for questions.
Any questions? Mr. House?
Yes, Madam Mayor, and Ms. Peugeot, the city just finished the general plan update, and we're getting into the implementation side of it. How closely have you followed that whole process and prepared to move into the implementation side?
Mm-hmm. Yes, Councilmember House, I did follow the process. I attended several of the planning workshops as a community member and also as a representative of our ad hoc neighborhood group on Upper Chapala. So I participated and contributed to that process. I monitored and read several of the reports. I did have the privilege of reading the environmental document front to back and made some comments on that while employed at the county still. And I've been following the progress of the city in moving towards implementation of that plan, which is a very large task. And I have a lot of experience in applying ordinance and programs to policy and general plan documents. And it's a very critical part of the process, and seeing success of this plan over time will only depend on how well the implementation works. And I do have quite a bit of experience in that area and also experience in looking for the clarity in documents and making sure that the definitions say and do what they're meant to do, and that it all backs up and furthers the goals and the policies of the plan. So I could dig into that right away. And I have tracked a little bit of your workshops on the status of the plan, and I know you just finished the historical element and whatnot, and so I was following that as well. So I've been keeping track.
Thank you.
Ms. Murillo.
Councilmember House asked my question, but I'm very impressed with your application. Ms. Peugeot, thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you. Anyone else for the Planning Commission? Rental Housing Mediation Task Force? Yes, come on up.
Good evening, Mayor Schneider and Commission members. My name is Jay Rollins, and for the past couple of years, I've been a member of the Board of Directors for New Transitions, which handles housing homeless families and also operates a shelter for homeless families. 92% of these families come from Santa Barbara. They're not transiting into the city. And what I'd like to do basically is just cross over the fence and work on the other side and prevent people from becoming homeless families in the first place, because it'd be much easier, I think, to keep people in the housing they're already in than to try to mediate them into housing once they've been evicted and lost their credit and everything. And that's about it. Not complicated.
Well, it's complicated, but it doesn't sound complicated, does it? Mr. White.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So I see that your career was with the Social Security Administration, is that right?
Well, no, I currently live on Social Security.
Oh, you live on Social Security, okay.
Which gives me the time
Okay.
to work on these.
I misread your application, sorry.
These boards of directors. Career-wise, I mostly worked in land surveying, and I have a degree in cartography from Roosevelt University in Chicago.
Yeah, I see we have just yet another map guy here. We had another one earlier this evening, too. That's very, very great. Thank you.
I got involved with New Transitions through being one of the adversarial parties in my own rental mediation situation. And HUD regulations require a certain makeup of the boards. And being from the east side, which is well, it's not Montecito, so they want a cosmopolitan makeup on the board. And being on Social Security disability, I just managed to fall into that slot.
Any other questions? Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Santa Barbara Youth Council, come on up.
Good evening, Madam Chair and City Council. My name is Cambria Dela Cruz, and I'm a sophomore at Santa Barbara High School, and I am currently applying to be appointed to the Youth Council. I recently joined ASB this year, and I am one of 3 Spirit and Music Commissioners. My responsibilities as a Spirit and Music Commissioner is to support and promote all aspects of the school, including events, games, and clubs. Outside of school, I am a member of the cross-country and track team. I enjoy working as a team because you work toward accomplishing a common goal. If I am appointed to Youth Council, I will bring creativity, great communication skills, and organization. I think it's important to be part of an organization that involves youth, represents youth, and affects youth, which is why I want to be appointed to the Youth Council. I both love and admire its dedication and interest displayed towards the youth in Santa Barbara. An issue I would like to tackle is to unite the young adults of Santa Barbara by increasing and organizing activities for young adults. I am willing and committed to devote the time necessary to Youth Council if I am appointed. Thank you for your time, and I would be honored to answer any of your questions.
Thank you. Any questions? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay. So I think, Mr. Ruiz, you are the only one left in the room who has not been interviewed, unless I'm missing someone. So instead of going through the list, you're for the Water Commission. Come on up.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, members of the council. For the record, I'm Russell Ruiz, applying for another term on the Water Commission. First, I'll just comment, it's encouraging to see such a talented pool of applicants here tonight. As is my standard approach, I stated what I thought was most significant in my written application, and I think I did a pretty good job of anticipating your general questions on the questionnaire. So I'm going to just tonight respond to the 2 questions for applicants who are current incumbents. The first reads, what is the most significant or rewarding experience during your tenure? And I'm going to answer with the process that I think spanned over 2 years, began with the Water Commission's initial consideration of the general plan water supply issues, and it culminated with the final approval last year of the city's new long-term water supply plan. Of course, those 2 processes were related. Staff did a good job of kind of transitioning us from one to the next. My colleague, who you're going to hear from next week, Landon Newstead, and I had a particular interest in the general plan, so we formed a general plan committee, and we were successful in bringing the rest of the commission along to be very engaged and interested and put a lot of work into the process. And the culmination of that process was a new long-term water supply plan that was approved by both the Water Commission and your council on unanimous votes. We worked through a lot of issues to get there, but I think those unanimous votes were indicative of the success of the process. The second question is the City Advisory Group operating as well as it could? What improvements, if any, could be made? And I'm going to answer that question in the context of my first answer. To the extent when I first came on to the Water Commission and I saw some issues that I thought could be improved or changed, I believe all of those have been addressed today. And I believe much of that can be attributed to the process that I just described. In getting into the general plan and the new long-term water supply plan, the commission learned how to work well as a commission. We did a lot of great work with staff, and I think staff got used to working with us. And so today, I'm very happy with the way the commission is operating. I think we have a great relationship with staff. I have great respect for Rebecca Bjork. I think we're lucky to have her. And I've always very much enjoyed working with all the senior staff who we actually have direct working relationship with at the Water Commission meetings. So I'm going to conclude by just commenting on the relatively recent appointment of Megan Burney. I think we haven't been able to determine whether she's the youngest person to ever serve on the Water Commission, but she's certainly a lot younger than the other 4 of us, but extremely intelligent, comes with a great background. She's gotten immediately engaged, and she's a pleasure to work with. So I hope you give me the opportunity to continue to work with her and the rest of the commissioners and staff and your council. So, unless you have any questions for me?
Any questions?
Thank you.
Thank you for your service.
All right, thank you.
Okay, that concludes this round of interviews, and I believe we have one more next week, November 20th. And that will do it. We're adjourned. Brenda, you're done.